I don't want to bore you with insignificant details, but about halfway through my screening of this film, the fire alarm went off and they had to evacuate the entire theater. There was no fire, but this gave me a good half hour of reflection on what I had seen so far, which was nice, but at the same time I was kind of ready to just get on with the rest of it at that point. Megalopolis. It's the new film from director Francis Ford Coppola, who, if you're a cinephile and you don't know who that is, come on, man. He's obviously a big legendary director. The Godfather trilogy, Apocalypse Now, Bram Stoker's Dracula, among many others. And allegedly, this is a movie 40 years in the making. Apparently, right after Apocalypse Now released in theaters, he immediately set his sights on making this. I'm sure a lot changed over the years as he developed it. But the point is, this is clearly a passion project from him, and he spent a long time thinking about it and developing it, and he also spent a lot of money on it. He even sold part of his wine business, supposedly, in order to fund this thing. And over the last few months, as reviews have started to come out, it was clear from the get-go that this movie was going to be extremely divisive. The closest thing I could compare it to, in terms of what I was expecting going in, is Babylon, a movie that obviously divided critics. But for me, that film wound up being quite good, because I appreciated its unadulterated chaos, and I felt that it was actually very purposeful in the message that the film was trying to convey. No such luck here, unfortunately. Megalopolis is set in the fictional city of New Rome. It's clearly meant to be a blending of ancient Rome and modern America. If the wardrobing and Roman architecture weren't enough to suggest this blending of time periods, then the constant nonsensical Shakespearean dialogue should do the trick for you. Adam Driver stars as Caesar Catalina, the chairman of the design authority. He's an architectural visionary with plans to turn New Rome into a thriving utopia called Megalopolis. How does he intend to do this, you might ask? Well, we get a small glimpse into some of his plans, but most of it boils down to this new material that he's invented and won the Nobel Prize for inventing, called Megalon. Not the character from Godzilla, even though it has the same name. And honestly, I couldn't tell you what Megalon is after watching the film, because it's never really explained. It clearly is meant to be the backbone of the architecture in his new civilization, but it also has medicinal properties, as we see throughout the film. Who knows what else this shit can do, because the movie never clues us into it. Oh yeah, and Caesar can also freeze time at will. There's a lot of talk in this movie about time and humanity's feeble understanding of it, which I like. It made me sit back and think for a minute about time as a construct, as something, a variable that we have no control over. Well, Caesar does, even though his ability never comes into play in the story whatsoever. It is so irrelevant, despite the fact that it sounds like something that would be very important. So Caesar is planning this utopia, but he's not well loved by all. His own cousin, played by Shia LaBeouf, is involved with public protests against his plans. Mayor Franklin Cicero, played by Giancarlo Esposito, has a burning rivalry with him. And that doesn't even scratch the surface. Aubrey Plaza is in this as a television reporter named Wow Platinum, and she's also Caesar's mistress. The mayor's own daughter, played by Natalie Emanuel, lusts for Caesar against her father's wishes, so there's a point of conflict between Caesar and the mayor in that regard as well. All the while, we are subjected to these ridiculous, often abstract set pieces during which Caesar contemplates his plans. Other characters attempt to push their agendas, either for or against his, and we see how the citizens of New Rome are responding. This movie is absolutely confounding in every single way. It cannot go 2 scenes without going on some wild tangent, a tangent that, mind you, it will probably never touch on again in its entire 2-hour and 20-minute runtime. There are so many ideas piled into here, but not a single one gets enough focus to actually go anywhere. Lots of weird shit too. There's a Colosseum sequence with carnival-style performances, characters trip on drugs and attend parties, weddings, a satellite is crashing into Earth. So many details, some of which are just jumping back into my mind right now because I forgot they were even a part of it. Coppola uses a lot of split screens, dizzying camera movements, and an absurd amount of artificial-looking green screens, many of which I think were done intentionally, but it doesn't change the fact that they often looked like garbage. I spent a large portion of the movie also trying to figure out if the dialogue was intentionally bad or if Coppola had just lost his marbles, because some of these conversations are just so stilted and awkward. The way these people talk is just flat out bizarre. Every character either talks like they're quoting Shakespeare or they're reading off of cue cards, and it may have been true for some of them. Many of the actors are bringing such drastically different energy to the table that I honestly sat back and questioned whether or not they stumbled off from about a dozen different film sets. Adam Driver clearly has a very serious and reserved performance, and I think he does a good job trying to convey whatever the hell Coppola is doing, but I couldn't tell you what that is, even though he tries his best. Plaza is hamming it up the entire time, and people were laughing at a lot of lines that I don't think were meant to be laughed at. Some of them probably were, but who knows? There are interesting elements, interesting scenes, interesting characters, interesting visuals, and it's never truly boring, but it all adds up to nothing. That's the problem. It also occasionally leans into pretentious attempts at historical commentary. There's a moment that metaphorically references Hitler and some other dictators like Mussolini, and it just rubbed me the wrong way. Whenever this movie is on the cusp of actually saying something, it chickens out and has Lawrence Fishburne say something like, "As the fables of time carry on, so do the machinations of societal downfall," or some stupid shit that just doesn't make any sense. It is an absolutely scatterbrained, incoherent train wreck, and Coppola marketed this film with a trailer that has fake pull quotes from alleged critics who didn't like Apocalypse Now and The Godfather when they first released. And he's trying to portray this film as a piece of art that is initially going to be disliked, and later down the road people will see it as a masterpiece. I don't know if that was true for Apocalypse Now and The Godfather, because I obviously was not alive when those films came out. But I don't think that's going to be the case with Megalopolis. I think most people will see the potential in this film that I did. Some will definitely hate it, but I think most will recognize that there are at least some good elements in this melting pot of madness. I don't see anyone really loving it. Again, I'm sure some will, but it's just too unfulfilling, unnecessarily abstract, constantly emotionally distant, and just flat out incomprehensible. There were too many moments in which I was looking at the screen, had no idea what I was looking at, how it came to be, or why it's there. And the ending was weird too, because I actually expected it to go on for like another 20 minutes, and I guess my timekeeping was just not on point. With that said, I've certainly never seen anything like Megalopolis, so for that alone, I'm gonna give it 2 stars. This is for die-hard cinephiles only, and maybe film students too. And I say film students because this would be a great film to study in order to learn what not to do in the editing room, because this literally feels like 100 scenes taken from a bunch of different films, all shoved together into this blender, and it just barfed out onto the screen. And so much for like the $120 million that Coppola spent developing this. I don't think he's gonna see that money come back because the box office projections are not great. So those are my thoughts on this ungainly, massive disaster that is Megalopolis. If you do see the film, I'm dying to know what you guys think, so drop down into the comments and let me know. Is it a masterpiece? Is it a flaming pile of garbage? Is it somewhere in the middle, kind of like me, but I still obviously steer way more towards the negative side? Be sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. See you later.